Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Tyler Edlin and this is another episode of Brush Sauce Theater. Now today we'll be talking about drawing bolder and dynamic compositions. A lot on this channel I've covered values, maybe over extensively, so we're going to look at that step that comes before values, before adding color and light to your image, and it's all the way at the bottom of our foundation in terms of composition and design, and that's drawing and that's the structure. So today I have laid out three different levels of student work that I currently have, going from kind of weak to a bit better, and we're going to analyze and kind of talk about the compositional shapes and the design of the structure of them, not so much the value. So this is one student's here who's been working on some comps. A simple scene and structure, a horse, a rider, a canyon, perhaps some light storytelling elements. Now, value, edges, everything aside, what we did first when we went over this was I would cover the canvas like so. I lower that canvas and I go, how are your shapes doing? What is working? What is the movement? What is the designing principle going on in your scene? I'm kind of first and foremost concerned with that. So right, if I just I'm going to use purple to highlight this now. If I'm drawing and I'm basically highlighting and I'm tracing the scene, to find the edges, to find the shapes, to figure out the flow, with the composition, it's going to look something kind of like this. Now, this in every scenario is a bit of an oversimplified version of it, and that's fine. That's kind of what we want, like that shape I have here for the rider. Oh, I got to work on that. Right, we have the horizon line. We have a nice bold shape here. We have a shape here. Again, we have our rider, and we have some waterfalls. So this is like if we take the image, we break it down and look at the bare bones minimum structure in a scene. What are we basically left with? And as you can see, we're getting quite a mixed results. There's all kinds of things happening. Some of them have a flow. Some of them are guiding and have a path to bring the viewer's eye in and around. Sometimes it leads us in, sometimes it leads us out. But more often than not, when I'm looking at these shapes, I'm seeing a lack of sophistication of them. I'm not sure how they're supposed to make me feel, as the viewer. And I think that's where, again, first and foremost, these could be improved the most. Before we look at the value, before we look at the lighting, it's just the raw, shapes, of the composition, of the design of the image. So now we'll look at a different batch from kind of a student that's just a little bit further along here. And this person's getting it a bit more. So like a very grand, very ambitious idea. They want to do an establishing shot of the city. So again, kind of the further you zoom out on a shot like this, the more the shapes have to read, the more the silhouettes are going to play up in terms of importance. So these are all fairly clear. Like I can look at these and I can understand what's happening. So that's a good thing. Well, this one's a bit rough out there. We'll not talk about that one. But overall, I think even with slight tweaking on these, they could all be pushed there. And these are fine. These are fantastic for first round sketches. And in this scenario, what I recommend to the student is I go, what is your favorite one? What do you like so far the most? And in this case, the student, chose this one. So we're like, okay, we'll take that. And then we break that down. We really analyze it, and we make sure all the shapes in the scene are kind of playing toward, what that student wants to express. And that sheet sometimes, or in this case, kind of looks like this. So I drag their composition onto a new canvas, just like we see here, and I'm like, okay, same thing like we did before. Let's break down the most simple fundamental shapes in the scene and see how things are going to lay out. How are they going to play out down the road for us? So see, if we lower the opacity of this, we can almost see one for one, like, okay, that's how it's going to happen. So what I like to do in the most bold, in simplistic shapes that I can make, I try to start dividing the composition up and make big gestural marks to figure out how we can lay these shapes out. How can we overlap them to increase depth and how can we create big, medium, and small ones as well, as those usually create the most interesting sort of contrast. And you can see I just labeled that here, right? We have basically L, right? This is a large shape in a scene. I considered this one, in this case, this is a bit of a small one. It's a wedge, and then this is that's a medium one, and then they kind of go on, so on and so forth from there, right? We have a few nice small ones in here, accompanied by a few more, medium and small again. So it's a nice rhythm, and it's something that you got to work from. Now, basically, from this, when we look at it like that, we try to see things abstractly. How does this work? So you could take those shapes, and essentially you could plug any sort of information into them. You want a snowy scene? Okay, we'll make this the snowy. You want to make this desert? We can do desert. Anything we want, we can adapt it to those shapes. And as you can see, like, the second round would then go to something like this. We copy and paste that layer. We move down. We start looking at the shapes again. How can we start to transform this into a more literal sense for what you're trying to go for? And we start adding and subtracting the shapes. I mean, okay, right? If I have a long vertical coming here, it's like, okay, how do we actually, erase, part of that line coming up into here, so we can make that all, right, a unified shape for the ground? Or if this is intersecting this, how can we, basically make visual, pictorial space makes sense out of the shapes that we have? And that's kind of that second pass. And then again, that would just get cleaned up, and as you can see, it's getting refined as that process kind of goes forward, until we have a very bold, in simple dynamic composition with that. Now, another approach to this, that this student that is kind of already in that mindset where they're just abstractly thinking about shapes for their scene. And we have this from Anna. Anna's doing fantastic stuff. She's doing this scene from Conan with some kind of bone and skeleton king, and he's going to be creeping in, and there's light, and it's in like this dark encrypted tomb. But she is already thinking abstractly. She is already thinking just in terms of shapes. She's thinking of large shapes, medium shapes, small shapes. She's thinking about how these shapes can line up and direct the viewer eye. It's all very suggestive at this point, and that's a fantastic foundation to kind of start. And I think she ultimately is going with this one here that I started drawing over, so I guess we'll see in an upcoming week or two how that's playing out. But again, there's many different ways to approach composition. There's many ways to draw your scenes, and there's many ways to focus on design. And that is something I like to practice regularly, like myself. So again, this is an example, right, where this is what not to do, so we can learn from this mistake here. I'm not picking on you, Mipsy. This ultimately, and this was from a little while ago, and it ultimately kind of panned out really well for the student. But this is an example, maybe a couple painting sessions in, and we get to it, we break it down, and we're like, okay, what's going on? Right? So I put, again, a piece of virtual tracing paper there, and we figure out the shapes. And the shapes in the scene look something like that. So it's like, okay, but there's certainly room for improvement. We can work on the flow. We can work on the storytelling and the narrative. Right now, a huge part of the problem is that we have, 1, 2, 3. We have the arch, we have a great tree, and we have basically a shrine at the base of the tree. All major elements for my students' storytelling are lined up in cluster mashed right together. And we don't want that. We want to give them a little space to breathe, and we want to scatter them around to trickle in, to give the viewer some play and to guide their eye in. So my recommended course of action for this scene was to do something a bit more like this. Right, we have a much bolder sense. We have all the elements. We have the tree, we have the shrine, we have the archway. So as I just highlight a few of these key marquee shapes here, you can see how I was kind of thinking about this. Right, my first move is always some kind of bold, shape. Like, what's the ground or what's the horizon look like? In this case it was, this. We're just going to go like that. And then, of course, I'm thinking about what's the next most important element in your scene. Well, it's your great tree. So I'm thinking, right, if we make a nice big shape, kind of like this, and this is how I first, gestured it out, right? It very much, see, it's probably easier to go actually a little lighter. Maybe not, right? But this is how I was thinking about, like, see, now we have that shape, and this, of course, is under negative space, right? So the tree is making up this nice swooping gesture. And the thing is, playing up the storytelling element, we want to be looking up at the, the majesticness of this tree, the majesty of it. So essentially we want to see underneath it. And so that's what I kind of suggested at this loose shape, kind of right here, that I put in pink. So essentially, what I was trying to show, everything in this pink here would be under the umbrella of the tree, and we're really looking kind of up, at that, underneath it. That'll be all in shadow. So right, we have the major, right, we have the horizon, or the hill, we have the tree itself, and then, of course, what are the other major elements that we need for this scene? It's that archway, and it's that pathway up to the tree. So what I did here, I started breaking down, I'll use a different color, why not? Started breaking down a nice little path, for that tree that basically, kind of looked, something like this. And eventually that's going to kind of go up to the shrine. So essentially what we'll have here is that archway, boom, boom, and of course we'll have that shrine at the base of the tree. So now again, if I shut this off, we have all the major elements in the scene. We have the storytelling, we have the setting. So now when I'm approaching composition design like this, I now let everything else in the scene, every line, every shape, every form, dictate that storytelling and flow, and essentially support that focal point, right? So this is a focal point, that's a focal point, and to some degree this is a focal point. It's kind of got three. Of course, having a hierarchy of them, knowing what's the most important, really comes in handy here. But anyways, and you can see when I kind of put the rest of the drawing in here together, right, all these shapes, no matter what they're doing, they're kind of just supporting actors in that scene. They're used just to kind of figure out things. So what is that negative space left on the horizon of the tree, and what kind of shape is the sky making, right? And so, what does become that negative space in the whole scene? Well, it's this, and then it's ultimately going to be this shape. So, visually in pictorial space, everything's a lot more impactful. It's very bold, it's very dynamic, and it's very direct in focus. And to kind of, if you're at that level where you just want to practice comps and designs, that's what I do sometimes. It's like, let's forget everything else. Let's forget details. Let's forget lighting. Let's just focus on what that story moment is and what kind of shapes can we use to direct it. So, this was kind of another example I was showing a student. If we want to create, just, this is what I do. I practice drawing shapes and work on my comps using just the line, the most basic tool that we have. And so I did a series of them, just kind of drawing, it's almost like Western theme. I picked a theme that day, and it's like, let's practice drawing my shapes and my storytelling in that sort of environment. Now here it's right, when in doubt, just simplify and try to make the shapes work. So this is no characters or anything in it. This is just about this hill right here, and that's fine. Everything in the scene, this would eventually be a desert, right? Everything else is rocks. It just comes about making these nice shapes. So here's the sky. What's left there is the clouds. And that's how you that first very step you want to look at things. If you're struggling with composition, if you're struggling with design, if you're struggling with what you want to say in an image, it all comes down to the shapes. So eventually, I don't know, I'm painting this one now. Maybe that's a teaser for later. I'm working on it. But if you guys want to practice this and you're not quite up to that level where you're designing your own scenes from scratch, I can highlight just this awesome exercise that you can use today at any skill level to help you. So grab a piece of photo reference, or maybe your own photography. I go to mapcrunch.com. I type in, it is a random location generator like on Google Earth. And so you can pan the camera angle around. You can find your own camera. So I find this shot right up here, number one. Second pass is I try to design that scene. I try to increase the sophistication of the shapes. Essentially what we're doing here is we're art directing reality, which is a great practice for anyone. So I'm working on the shapes. I'm going to add a little car, in the big, I'm adding a focal point. I'm adding a storytelling moment to it. And then that way, from there, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. I did a very, very quick value structure pass on that. I would still lighten the whole background a bit and everything, but it was done in 2 minutes, and I've already kind of expressed what I need to with it, or kind of find the path that I would go to polish this to a finish. But anyways, guys, this is going to about wrap it up today. Let me know if you found this helpful. Let me know if you guys have other ideas for future episodes or things that I can kind of cover. All right, take care. Thanks for watching, particularly if you made it to the end here. If you'd like to support the channel, please like, share, and comment. You can find me on Facebook, ArtStation, and Instagram. Now, I share different content on each platform, so feel free to stalk me across the web. Feel free to join the Brush Sauce community as linked below. We do hangouts, have a Discord channel, host challenges, and support each other in artistic growth. Finally, if you'd like to inquire about my one-on-one mentorship program, head over to tyleredlinart.com, click on the mentorship tab for information, and shoot me an email. Also, I run 2 courses at the Computer Graphics Master Academy. Feel free to check out those as well. Take care.